Okay guys, hi. Today we're going to do the shift dress sloper draft, and it's pretty simple because we're going to be basically just manipulating the bodice sloper to create it. So it's pretty quick, it's pretty easy, and it's going to be one of at least a couple ways that I show you how to do a sort of different type of dress sloper. I'll probably also maybe do the strapless foundation. And again, just like the pants, you can choose which one you do for the assignment, for the dress sloper assignment. If you do both, you'll get extra credit. And then, of course, just sort of following along our pattern, the subsequent week, we're going to go ahead and do a student dress draft. And so you can sort of pick whichever sloper is going to be most aligned with what you're going to do for the dress. Now also remember that you can always use your skirt sloper in tandem with your bodice sloper and create a dress with a waist seam. You can do this for flared dress, so if you just draft a basically flared skirt, then pair it with a modified bodice, you have a dress as well. So you can do that as well. You do not need to use with a sloper for the next project, for the student design dress, because again, it's up to you. You'll use whichever slopers will be most suitable toward your dress design. Okay, anywho, let's get started. And of course, because we're going to be using our bodice sloper, we're going to be doing a size 8. So let's open up our bodice. Here we are, and I got my measurement chart out too, not on the screen but on my hand, and we're not going to need too many measurements, but it's good to have. We'll need a couple. But first thing, what we're going to do is we're going to make some slashes in our bodice. So let's get a nice zoom in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slash from my midpoint shoulder down to the dart tip here. Now I'm also going to continue and cut out my dart right here. And that'll be important later because we are going to do a little bit of dart rotation. So let's get that done. So I'm going to use the cut piece tool, and actually let's first cut out the dart. It might be easier to do so. So just clicking at all the points of the dart. And I can get rid of this piece for now, so I can move it out and delete it. And let's hold down the Alt key to make sure, oops, I already made a point. Let's get rid of that point. I have a sensitive touchpad. So I'll hold the Alt key down and then click for sure to make sure that I am okay. There we go. Don't know why I was not working for a second. But I want this to be midpoint, so I'm going to do by proportion values, and then cut straight down to the dart tip. Alrighty. Alright, we're going to leave off here for a second and then head on over to our back. And the back I'm going to do the same thing with cutting out the dart. Although that might be a little less necessary. I think we're going to pivot that less. I'm going to do another slash to pivot. But anyways, doesn't matter. We're going to get rid of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a cut that is pretty much 2 inches in and paralleled along this line. So to get it nice and perfect, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Create in Parallel tool to give us a guideline on which to cut. So again, I kind of want to start up here, because remember we always have to go in a clockwise fashion around the figure. I'm going to go 2 and 2. Now what's going to happen is this is going to be slightly less because you see this is sort of curved and it's taking the curve distance. So if I do 2 inches out, might be a little more, a little bit less, but so long as distance from the contour here, that's going to be pretty good. Let's do it from last point. That's really what we want, to be close to 2, and it is, so I'm happy with that. Again, because they're asking us to measure 2 inches in here and then parallel it up. Okay, that looks great. Sure, why not? Now let's cut it. And it's nice and easy for us since we already have that line made for us. Okay, excellent. That's basically the first step. So again, this is a little bit of an easy draft. Then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to start to build out the sort of bottom part of this. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to build only to about the hip arc. Now below the hip arc, obviously that's too short, you know, for a dress, unless you're going to wear anything on the bottom, because as we know from the pants, the crotch level is even below the hip line. So, you know, if you don't want your crotch hanging out, you got to make your dress a little bit longer. But just for the drafting purposes right now, we're only going to do it to the hip line. Below the hip line, we'll pretty much do it straight down. But again, just be careful if you are going to use that, you know, fitted straight down, to add either slits or vents or kick pleats or something like that. We haven't done kick pleats yet. Maybe we'll show you how to do a kick pleat. Because that walking ease, if you don't flare it out, is going to get very tight and it's going to become unwalkable very quickly. Anyways, that'll be more for sort of what we do next week. Anywho, what I want to do is I want to create a box that is pretty much going to be from my waist down to my hip. So let's go to Piece, New Piece, Create Rectangular Piece. And my length, I want it to be my hip depth. And for the front, I'm going to use my front hip depth. And let's look that up. Center front hip depth on a size 8 is 7 3/4. Okie doke. And then the width, I would like my hip arc, my front hip arc for the front, plus a 1/2 inch of ease. Okay, so let's look up our hip arc for a size 8, and that is 7 7/8. And we're going to add a 1/2 inch to that. So that will be 9 3/8. Okay. All right, let's make our box. Now, let's make sure that it's rotated in the correct way, because what I would like is I would like the long side, which is the hip arc, to actually be the other way. But let's just measure because they're pretty close. And it's kind of hard to see. Okay, yeah. So let's rotate it around so it's correct. We want the long side being horizontal and the shorter side to be the vertical side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these guys up right now, and I'm going to help to do that with a guideline. A guideline is going to help to do that. So I'm going to draw out a guideline and drop it right here on my center front of the bodice. Then I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I have a little bit more room underneath this. And I'm going to grab my piece number 3, the piece that I just made, and I'm going to match that upper right hand corner with this point right here, and then match along the side there. So let me zoom in to show you what I've done, make sure that I have it all correctly lined up anyway. So a little bit of a gap there. So I have this edge again lined up with my guideline, and I want this upper right hand corner of that rectangle lined up with that center waist point of the bodice. Okay? Now what we're going to do is I'm going to scoot over here to this other side, and I want to make a small point here just inward of this upper left-hand point, and it's going to be 3/4 of an inch in. We're going to do that with our point on contour tool. Boop. Of course, this would be our previous point, so we'll put in our 3/4 there, or 0.75, whichever you like, and let's make it grading. It doesn't necessarily need to be grading, but we're going to be aligning with it, so just the larger size of the grading point is going to be helpful to us. Here we are. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to pivot the left half of the bodice sloper, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the dart. It's going to look a lot like dart rotation. And I'm going to close it until the point over here touches this point that I just made, or the square line at least. So let's zoom out, and I want to keep this here, okay? So I don't want to shift it out. So it might be a little bit tricky to get the rotation that you want with the rotation point, so it might take a little time to click correctly with your rotation tool, because I don't want to move these pieces. I don't want to move this out. I don't want to move this out. I want to keep these exactly where it is, and I want to keep this point exactly where it is. So what I'm going to do to help me is I'm going to select this left half first, then choose my rotate piece tool and hope that it selects the right half. And it did. Usually it will prefer a piece if it's selected. Okay, and the reason is we want to keep this point right here on the apex. It's very important that we keep it there on the apex. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to rotate that dart in until this touches this line. Maybe I need it, there we go. Okay, now we're going to do the same for the back. Let's zoom out for a second. So I want to make a similar piece for the back as well. So I'm going to go to piece, new piece, create rectangular piece, and we're going to put in the same information except just for the back. So looking at our measurement chart, our hip depth for the back is 5 5/8. So we'll do a length of, 7 5/8. And a width of the back hip arc plus a 1/2 inch. So our back hip arc is 9 3/8. So that will be 9 7/8. Okay, we're going to have to rotate it again. Don't worry about the arrows or anything right now, because of course these are not our finalized pieces. Now what I want to do is I want to line up this square just like we did before. So let's drag out another guideline and place it along our center back. Oh, it's snapping here, but I want it to snap to the other guy. There we go. And now let's bring this up to meet, so that upper left hand point is going to go ahead and match right here. Now on the instructions, if you're following the instructions, they give several versions of creating the back. And we're going to do version 3, the compromise. So one version makes the center back length a little bit longer, one makes the width across the back a little bit longer, or bigger, I should say, and one is sort of the compromise between the two. And that's the one that we're going to be doing. So we've already placed this here, and what we want to do is now grab this piece here and pivot it out until this little guy hits another point right here. Now we do want him to hit that point, unlike here where we're just looking for it to align up here. So let's zoom in so we know what we're doing. And let's place our point. And again, it's going to be 3/4 of an inch in, just like it was on the front. And let's make it grading again just so we can see it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I want to pivot this guy, and this is going to be the pivot point up here. And again, I don't want to move him out or anything because I need this pivot point to stay there. I need it to be nice and flush with this armhole curve. So I'm going to select it first and then go to my rotate piece tool and hope it selects the right one. And it did. And what I want to do is that sideways point, I want to pivot it until it hits that point that I just made. So I'm looking for that point here. See, it's coming down and it's hitting that waist point there. Okay? So it is going to alter our armhole a little bit, but not too much. Okay? Now, we have most of the drafting done. We just have to go ahead and basically finish up our pieces. And we're going to do that by first redrafting what we have. So let's go ahead and zoom all so we can see everything. And I'm just going to go and just by dragging out a box, select everything, including you, and protect everything. Okay? What about you? I meant to protect you. Okay, doke. Now that we have everything protected, I'm going to go ahead and redraft everything. Now, it's not going to be exactly as it is, okay? Because I'm going to make a little bit of changes, especially around the side here. And that's where, again, this point is really going to come into play. So let's do it one by one, and I'll let you know where I am or am not deviating from our basic pattern. So let's grab our draft tool, and I'll start up here. Again, doesn't really matter where you start, just so long as you start and finish at the same point. And I do not want to remove my protection. And let's hold Shift to curve it. And these are all going to be exactly. Now, if you want to have a sort of where your across chest is, you can put these points in as a sort of way to know where your chest is, where your bust is, things like that. So I would recommend it. It's always kind of nice. Oops. So I made a mistake here. I curved this point, but that's okay. It's going to be easier for me to continue on and then correct that point once the draft is finished. So if you do make a mistake like that, you curved a point, it shouldn't be curved, or vice versa, just keep going. It's always easier to change afterward. Here's the waist. I want the waist point as well, so I'm going to have markings where my chest, bust, and waist are. Come all the way down here, all the way across. Now what I'm going to do, here's where it's going to start to get away from the pattern piece. What I want is I want a nice sort of hip curve into this point here. So I'm going to go maybe 2/3 of the way up and in and make a curve point. No, it's going to snap it to the contour anyways, but that's okay because I can fix it later. And then I'm going to go ahead and click here on that point that was 3/4 inch in from the edge. And then I'm going to go all the way up to right here and continue on doing exactly what the sloper, or the template I should say, is telling us. Now I'm not going to go in and do the dart. I'm going to go across because I'm going to put the dart in later with the dart tool. Yes. Okay. I've got a couple things to fix, so I want to move this point in a little bit. Let's zoom in so it doesn't have the tendency to want to snap, because you see that's kind of pushing out this way. It's kind of a funny shape. It doesn't exactly match up with what I want, but I'm just going to grab that point, and there we go. That's a better little hip curve there, and I'm not going past that point, which I don't really want. And then there was a point up here that I made. This one, this should be okay though. Alright, now let's do the other side. And what I'm going to do here is, very similar. Again, we can start and stop wherever we want. So, I don't know, I'll start right here. No, I don't want to remove it. But I do want to give a nice point to my waist, to shoulder blade, which could be good. It's not as useful as something like the bust, but heck. Let's do our neck. And we are actually going to keep this dart, so put in your dart points, at least the width. You don't need that middle point. And this I'm going to do exactly as is shown. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to follow this line, because it is going to that little point here, so I'm going to follow that, but then I'm going to curve this out. Well, there, it didn't snap, so good. So I put a little curve point in there to make a hip curve. And again, if it's not exactly what you want, you can always adjust it afterwards. Boop. So let me bring these guys out. Actually, before I do that, let me put in at least the shoulder darts. So I want a shoulder dart up here. And so let's grab our dart tool. Oops, I'm drafting for no reason. And it's going to go 1. Okay, so I guess I am going to move it out, or else it's going to try to do it with the boop. And boop. And I actually don't need these guys anymore, I don't believe, because I put in all the points that I need. And let's bring out this guy as well. Doot, plop. And okay, oh, I kind of did want them because I wanted to know where the dart point is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over, I guess, 1, just so I know where the apex is, which will help me right here make my dart. So I'm going to grab my dart tool, and 1. I'm just going to start here so it doesn't try to put it on the protected piece. 2, and we're going to bring it down, and I'm not going to bring it all the way to the apex. I'm going to make it about 1/2 inch to 1 inch away, a little bit like that. So again, you can sort of just make it and then measure. Should be about 1 inch, 1.25 inch is fine, so that's will be good enough. But it should be, I'd say between 1/2 inch and 1.5 inches. And again, it's all going to sort of depend on what you like, and also it depends a lot on bust size and fitting around a particular bust. Anywho, so that's the shoulder dart there. We're going to go ahead and put a couple diamond darts in it too, but let's put the shoulder dart in here as well. And I don't need any point. It should point down here. So let's see if I can put it in without moving the protected pieces. Okay. It's not going to let us, but let's see. Let's try this. Let's just shift it slightly. And hold shift to release the perpendicular snap to the dart. And I'm just going to do it slightly less, obviously, down here, because that's going to make the dart too long. So whatever you shifted here, just sort of look and be a little bit less. So this, again, you can measure just to make sure. So this, I shifted about 0.44. So I'm looking for this to be about 0.44. Ooh, a little bit more. So it's, let me increase my dart length. So let's select the dart. Select the dart and go to internal properties, and we needed to change that. So I think the dart was about 3 inches, so let's just make it 3 inches and then call it a day. And let's see, we can always just double check to make sure it's right by seeing if it overlaps properly, and it is, so good. Now we can get rid of the original and finalize our new pieces. So let's zoom all again and clean this up a little bit because it's looking awful messy. Okay. Now what we have to do, along with sort of finalizing with our grain and then labels and everything, we have to go ahead and put in some diamond darts, okay? So our diamond darts are going to be widest along the waistline. So let's just go ahead and put in a waistline, which is fairly easy for us to do because, again, we did go ahead and put those points there. So there's our waist line, and on the front, what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and go about up to the bust line, and they're going to go about 3 inches below our waistline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down a guideline here for our bust line. So remember how we created that point for our bust? There it is. And what we're going to want to do, so if that's the bust line, just like we wanted this to be about, say, 1 inch away, we want the darts here to be about 1 inch away from the apex, because we never want our darts to hit exactly on that apex. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a point down here that's just 1 inch lower than our bust line. And we can actually grab our guideline and just shift it down to that guy. Boop. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to draft in our diamond darts. We're actually going to draft them in. We're not going to use the dart tool because the dart tool only makes normal darts. It doesn't make diamond darts. And we're just going to draft in the normal ones. So each dart So I'm just reading over. So what we want to do is I'm actually going to square this down from the bust point. So I'm going to draw out another guideline and leave it right at that tip of that dart. Like so. And that's actually going to be our location of the first middle of the dart. So I'm going to put a point here. Boop. And make sure that's grading. Then another 1 3/4 inches. I'm going to do another point. Okie doke. And those are going to be the locations of our 2 darts. Now I want to zoom in, and we're going to place a few more points and lines to be able to draft out the rest of these darts. Okay, so let's zoom in nice and close. Now, these darts are going to have a sort of full width of a 1/2 inch, so a 1/4 inch on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and put on either side of these dots another point that's only about a 1/4 inch away from each of them. Do is I want to draft in a straight line up and down. That's going to give us the kind of height and drop of our darts. They're going to go 3 inches below. So I do want to measure from last point. I want no deviation right or left, and a good -3 in the change in our vertical axis. Okay? So right click, finish drafting. Do the same here. Moop. Right click, finish drafting. And I'm going to also go up, and I'm going to go up and stop right here on this line. So I don't need to type in a measurement. What I just need to do is click starting here, go up, hold the Alt key, and just make, since I'm clicking on the guideline, my vertical is set. I just want to make sure that I have no deviation in my horizontal axis. All right, looks good. Looks good. Okay, now I'm ready. Once I right click and finish drafting, since basically my width and my height of my diamond darts is all set out, I can go and trace the diamond in between the outer points and create my diamond darts, or as they call them, double end darts, or sometimes people call them fish darts. I'm not exactly sure why they call them fish darts, but it doesn't look like a fish to me. There we are. So there's our darts, and let's make sure, yep, okay. Now let's do it for the back. The back is going to be a similar procedure, and the darts are going to be slightly bigger, so a lot of the fit that you can see is going to happen for the front is going to happen with this dart right here. In the back, you know, this little guy doesn't do much, so in order to fit down here where the butt is pretty big, we're going to have bigger diamond darts. And what we're going to do is to create our sort of guideline here. Let me clear up my guidelines, because they can be a little bit confusing once you get too many of them. And since this is done, let's put that to side, focus on this guy right here. Our height is going to be based on a guideline just like it was here, but since we don't have a bust line in back, it's just going to be 1 inch below the armpit. So what we're going to do is put a point there so we can put a guideline there. Pretty close. Let's make it grading just so it's nice and big. And drop down the guideline. Drop. Okay. And we're going to put the first dart in 3 1/4 inches along our waistline. So I'm going to actually zoom in now because we're going to be doing a lot of points on the waistline. We're going to be doing all of our widths in sort of dart spaces. So the first one is going to be 3 1/4 inches in. And again, these should all be grading. And we're going to be working from our previous. There we are. And in between the darts is 2 1/4 inches. So now I'm going to put another point 2 1/4 inches away from this guy. What I'm going to do, just because it can be a little bit difficult to understand what point you're measuring when you're working on an internal line like this, I'm just going to go wrong and put it really close to this so I know that this is the point I'm measuring from. So that's really small, that's really big. I know I want to measure from here, so I know here is where I want to put that 2 1/4 inches. Okay. Now, each of these darts is going to have an inch width, so we're going to divide that up into a 1/2 inch on either side of these points. Ooh, look at that, perfect. Exciting. Let's see if I can do it again. Nope. And over here as well. Okay, now that we have our widths, we can go in and now use our draft tool to put in our heights. Let's zoom out a little bit. And it's going to go a lot like the front. So let's do the bottom first. The bottoms are going to drop down 5 1/2 inches. So no deviation in our horizontal and negative 5 1/2 in our vertical. Right click, finish drafting. And same thing over here. Okay. Right click, finish drafting. Oh, I don't need you. Oops, I just clicked and deleted that one point because I guess I had a straight click right after or before I finished drafting. Let's get back to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise up to the guideline. And again, just like in the front, the guideline is serving as our vertical measurement. And I just want to make sure that it's not deviating right or left by making sure that the horizontal value is 0. Right click, finish drafting. And once more from last point. Right click, finish drafting. Boop. Okay, now let's go ahead and draft out our darts just by connecting the dots. Boop. And once again. Boop. Okay. So let's just finalize these guys with the last couple things and understand what would need to be done a little bit further. So, you know, obvious things or first things to go ahead and take care of are the grain line and the pattern piece names. So let's correct our grain lines. Of course, they should always be going up along our center front and center back lines. And then we can also label them correctly. So I'm going to label this the back shift sloper. And we can obviously name this, you guessed it, the front shift sloper. And that's pretty much all we need to do for the sloper. Again, we don't need the seam allowance for our slopers because, again, these need to be altered further to be a finished pattern. And only we really see seam allowance when we get to finished patterns. At least we should. Sometimes when you guys give me your finished patterns, it's kind of shocking, at least at this point, that I see so many without seam allowance. Anywho, back to our slopers. So again, this is the sloper. Again, they are meant to be further manipulated, especially they need to be longer than this. Now you can also, if you say you don't want to make a dress, say you want to make a shirt that just simply goes past your waist, you can use this too as a sloper. These can go for sort of longer to the hip shirts, even jackets. You can use this to create I mean, they might need to be a little bit bigger, add a little bit more ease to them, but essentially you could use them for a sort of a jacket sloper because it does go down to the hip and it sort of combines that. And again, not a lot of our clothing these days really does end at the waist. So again, if you sort of revisit our shirt, a lot of our shirts, we made the sloper go to the waist, and most of our shirt projects did go to the waist. But if you look at actual collared shirts and actual shirts today, they go past the waist. They usually will go down to at least the high hip, and sometimes even longer, especially with dress shirts and collared shirts. And that's because of what I talked about a little bit in the pants, is pants, and also with skirts, tend to have a more dropped waist. Traditionally, if you look back to like the 50s and 60s and even the 40s, everything went to the waist. Pants went to the waist, skirts went to the waist, and it looks a little bit oddly proportioned to us. We would consider that a quote-unquote sort of high-waisted style, but it's not. It's just a waisted, because high-waisted means it goes above the waist. But most of our pants, most of our skirts, just the sort of normal modern style is to wear our bottoms at about the high hip. And again, this can really get to some extremes. So if you look at sort of low-rider jeans, and again, these lines will raise and lower with styles. Things have gone, I think things are going back up again these days. But, especially jeans, I'd say about like, early 2000s got really, really low. I mean, they were, just skirting above the hip, so low. And sort of to accommodate this, shirts got longer. Tops got longer, so you wouldn't have like a bare part. But there was sort of, kind of late 90s, early 2000s, that sort of crop top look, so you'd have really low jeans and a short t-shirt, and you would have that bare midriff. But of course, not everyone is up for bare midriff all the time, so if your pants have gone down, well, your shirts have to go down too. Anyways, but of course you can use this as a sort of sloper for a dress, and again, I'm going to go into all sorts of different dresses, constructions, and variations next week when we do our own dress project. But again, there we are, so pretty simple draft, again, because most of it, again, was already done because we did our bodice sloper. But you want to go ahead and save it as, and of course when you do this you can use your own bodice sloper, or you can use mine that I posted on Blackboard, shift sloper, or dress sloper if you will, and there you are. So, let me close out of here and then sign off. And so guys, this is going to be our last sort of section, the dress section. So look to Blackboard because I'm going to be posting final exam information pretty soon.